An Irish story, The Voyage of Bran. This is a bit like a Celtic version of the Odyssey, a journey to the Otherworld. So I'm going to tell this story and then I might talk a bit about the story at the end. So stay tuned, and if you like what I'm doing, then please feel free to like and subscribe. That would help me a lot. Thank you. Long ago, long ago, there was a high king of Éire, Ireland. His name was Bran, and he was high king in the centre of Ireland. And one day, during Beltane, 1st of May, the feast of the birth of summer, all the other kings of Ireland and their druids and their poets and their chieftains and their seers, they came to the fort of Bran on the plain of Tara in the centre of Ireland for the feasting. And everyone was gathered in the high keep, and the walls of the fort were sealed, and within the Beltane fires were lit. The bards would sing high praises to Bran, the high king. The champions did beat the crap out of one another in front of the fire. Everyone would play bets and drink cups of mead. There was much feasting and much merriment. The thing was, though, the thing with Bran, he didn't really tragic. He didn't really enjoy being king. He didn't really enjoy being around people that much. He always thought there was something else about life. And the thing with being a royal, the thing that royals don't really tell you, unless you're Prince Harry, is that you can never really get a moment to yourself. And I don't know if any of you are that kind of person. I am. Sometimes I just need a little moment of solitude. And if you're the king, the high king no less, you can't really have that. So on this day, this Beltane day, everyone was filled with mirth, and Bran had a rare opportunity to slip out into the night air and have a little moment of peace and quiet. And that is exactly what he did. He slipped out of the feasting hall while all the musicians were making sweet, sweet music, and he just walked out onto the ramparts of his fort, onto the high walls, and the night was still. The stars were looking back at him. The forest was quiet and shifting and moving, and he walked out of his castle walls, out into just the edge of the woodland. And he went, and was just alone with his thoughts for a while, thinking, this is sweet and rare. And then Bran heard a little snatch of music just behind his ear, and he turned around, but there was no one there, no musician, no lyre player, no harpist. And then he heard a second bit of music, and he turned around again, but there was no one there. And this music, let me tell you, it was sweeter than any of the music he had just been listening to inside the feasting hall. It sounded like the music of the other world, but he didn't know where it was coming from. And then he had a very unsettling thought. It was Beltane. One of the times, along with Samhain, Halloween, when the walls between this world and the other world become thin, and the spirits of the Sidhe, the fairy, the folk that live beneath the burial mounds and under the seas and beneath the lakes and mountains, can sometimes step into our world. Bran had this thought, and then the music overcame him, and he fell into a deep, deep sleep. As he slumbered on the grass just outside his very own fort, Bran had a vision, a dream, and in that dream, amid leaves and twisting briars and forests and coloured lights, he saw a woman beautiful woman wearing strange clothes from far away or long ago, and she was singing at him, calling his name and calling him to come across the sea to a fair island, an island of youth, Tír-na-nOg, that lay beyond the furthest ocean to the west. It's a strange dream. And when he woke, there were the stars winking back at him. There was the grass, but there, just arm's length away, was a branch of a tree. The old story says an apple tree, but apple just means fruit. And this branch, it held strange fruit and blossoms and fruit on the branch at the same time. It was like nothing he'd ever seen. It was silvery gold. It was a thing of wonder. Surely this fruit branch was from the other world, and he picked it up and marveled at it and sort of looked around himself. He was still alone, and then he wandered back through the gates of his keep, and as he walked through, all the guards, all the various people that were there standing watch, just gaped and marveled at this branch that Bran, the High King, held in his hand. And he walked straight into the middle of that feasting hall, and the whole place hushed. And Bran was just about to open his mouth to speak of the marvels that had just happened to him when he had a little slumber, when there, right in the middle of the feasting hall, right in the middle of everyone, was this woman. It was the same woman from his dream, but this time everyone else could see her too. They were gazing not at Bran, but at this strange creature, and it was absolutely clear as day that this woman was not of this world. How could she be? Because the walls of the outer fort were sealed. No one could get in. And just as this realization was landing on everyone, and she was wearing the strangest, most beautiful clothes, and she was ethereal to look at, she met eyes with Bran and sang a kind of song, or a kind of prayer or incantation meant directly for Bran. And she sang of an island that lay to the west, a utopia ruled by women, no less, where age and illness and suffering and death do not touch the people that live there, where everything is perfect, where there is sweet music, where there is no suffering, where you can hunt and play games all day, where every moment is like opening a present full of discovery. It was a beautiful song. And when she finished, she said to Bran, although all your company here can hear me, this song, Bran, is for you, because it is foretold that Bran, one day, High King of Ireland, will take a shipload of his best sailors and will find the island of women, the island of apples, it's sometimes called, Avalon sometimes in British mythology, that lies away across the sea. And then with that, the branch faded from Bran's hand and appeared in the hand of this fairy queen, this woman of the Sidhe, this woman from across the sea, this woman of the other world. And then the branch and the woman faded, and there were gasps from among the assorted members of Bran's court, and then music came out of the sweet air, and wonder was upon everyone's faces, and then everyone fell into a deep, deep sleep. Well, when the sun rose out of the mouth of the morning the next day, it was clear that this was not a dream of Bran alone. Everyone had seen it. Well, it was a sign. Bran wasted no time. He got his 3 brothers to get their 9 best sailors each, and then the 30 of them set sail in a coracle. It's a kind of old kind of boat that was very popular in Britain and Ireland back in the day. It doesn't have a sail, it's just rowed, flat-bottomed, good for going over the waves. Well, these 30 men left their lives and their families, and just following the fevered night vision of Bran, High King of Ireland, they set sail west looking for this mythical island, the Island of Women. So they sailed, and the people waved them off, never knowing if they were going to see their king again. And they sailed for 3 days across the sea, further than anyone had ever sailed before, across the endless ocean towards the very edge of the world. Now, on the morning of the 3rd day, a great storm was coming towards them. Great waves were coming up from the horizon. Huge waves. Surely this was the very edge of the world. And this little skiff, this little coracle, rode up on the waves like a mountain, up, hanging like this, up until this great mead dark wave was like a mountain, and they were on the very crest of the wave, and they could see for miles in all directions. There was no land, and then down the other side, right down into the chasm, so the waves were reaching up to the sky above them. They went up and down this great 3 times, up these three huge waves, and then down the other side. If the ship had a sail or some kind of, it was any other kind of boat, they would have been sunk. But because it was a coracle like that, they just bobbed on the surface of the waves without direction, spinning round and round until the storms died down and the sea became flat as a mirror, clear as glass. And the skies cleared and became blue, and they could see through the glassy depths far below them, and they were just completely lost on this ocean without any land in sight. And then there, on the western horizon, there was a crest of another kind of wave, and it got closer and closer and closer, and they realized it wasn't a wave at all. It was horses, white horses, rising out of the sea, and then the head of what looked like a man. And then a chariot. It was a chariot rising out of the sea itself, and sitting in that chariot was a god of a man. It was a god, hair tailing behind him, and around his neck was a golden torque, and armor encrusted with shells, dolphins leaping around the chariot. It was none other than Manannan Mac Lir, god of the sea, Celtic god of the sea, that is very well known to the people of Britain and Ireland, because when you live on an archipelago, the sea god is very important. But this sea god, he's not like Neptune or Poseidon of the Greek. This is a very Celtic deity. And this chariot drew alongside the boat of Bran and his sailors, and it travelled around them, and then he looked at them with a bit of a smirk, and he let out a bit of a laugh, and then he spoke to Bran directly and said, "Bran, High King of Éire, you will reach landfall before the sun sets today. But let me tell you, what you think is a sea around you is no sea, not to me. Your boat is floating over my orchard. You have floated over a great oak forest, with the bottom of your boat just skipping over the tops of the trees, and around you now is a rich orchard full of fruit. The cod and salmon that move beneath your boat are actually lambs and ewes that know no predators, and herring that flit through the sea and through the air. The flying fish that leap above you, they are murmurations of starlings. And what looks like an endless horizon of sea before you is actually a plain, a pleasant plain filled with white flowers. And on that plain is a hill. That hill, to you, is an island. You will reach it by nightfall." And then he laughed a strange laugh and said, "What you think of as time does not exist. What you think of as death is an illusion." And with that, Manannan, son of Lir, rode away on his chariot and sunk beneath the glassy sea and was gone. The Irishmen, their brains suitably melted by this revelation from the god of the sea, said nothing. They just rode on in silence, and sure enough, before the sun set the next day, they reached an island. It was a small island. And as they approached the shores of this island, Bran and his companions saw that the shores of the island were thronged with people that had gathered to see these newcomers that had sailed over from the far east. And they got closer and closer, and as they got closer, they could make out the faces of people. And as the people made out them, they pointed and laughed. They laughed at Bran and his companions. They laughed and laughed and laughed and whooped with laughter. Some of them clutched their bellies and fell upon the floor, giggling on the sandy beaches. And Bran called out to them and said, "Is this the Isle of Women?" And the assorted people looked at him and said, "The Isle of Women!" and just laughed and pointed and giggled and whooped with laughter. And Bran said, "Oi! I'm Bran, High King of Ireland! High King of Ireland!" And they laughed and laughed and laughed at him. Surely this was some kind of isle of madmen. You see, the woman in the dream before, they said that before they reach the Isle of Women, they will reach the Isle of Joy. But this didn't seem like an Isle of Joy. This seemed like an Isle of lunacy. Well, there was nothing else to do. Bran asked one of the sailors, a volunteer, to get ashore to see if they could get any sense out of these lunatics. So one of their number, they came quite close to the beach, and their laughter was ringing in their ears of a whole crowd of people lined up on the shore now, pointing at Bran. So one of Bran's number jumped off the ship and onto the beach and made his way up the sand. But as soon as he breached the waves and got onto the shore, something changed in him, and he turned around, and then Bran's companion also pointed at Bran and whooped and laughed and joined all the others in the mockery. And no matter how much Bran and his companions called this guy's name to get him to come back, nothing seemed to get through. He just pointed and laughed and laughed and laughed. They tried many times to get through to him all through the night, calling him, but he wouldn't answer. He just laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed, as if the mere idea of getting back on that ship with Bran and continuing on the voyage was the root of hilarity itself. In the end, by dawn, they had no choice. The other Irishmen had to leave their companion on the Island of Joy and sail on to the Island of Women. So they rowed on, and sometime later, day or two later, they finally reached the shores of another island. Now, this island was sweet. It rose out of the sea. There were fair snow-capped mountains on it and lush vegetation brimming with the most wonderful fruit trees. And Bran recognized the fruit trees. It was the same kind of tree as the branch that he had woken from his vision that Beltane night. And as they drew closer, underneath the boughs of these fruit trees, all with incense burning up and ribbons hanging from the branches and sweet music and flautists and gongs, there were many, many people thronging the shores, dancing in celebration. And every single one of them was a woman. All females, all beautiful, all arrayed in the most beautiful, exquisite, colourful clothes. And there on the landing point, beneath a great colourful temple of sorts, was the woman herself, the woman from Bran's dream, the woman that had appeared in the fort of Bran that Beltane night. And she called out to Bran, but Bran was cautious, you see. After what had happened on the Island of Joy just previously, they circled the island a few times just to get a measure of it. And the women were saying, come, Bran, High King of Ireland, we've been waiting for you. You've been destined to come for a very long time. And they got close, and Bran he just wanted to speak out to this woman. And she did a very clever trick. She threw something at Bran, and it sailed across the waves, and it was just about to hit Bran in the head. So he caught it instinctively and looked at it. It was a ball of string, a ball of yarn or thread or wool or something like that. And the other end of it was in the woman's hand, and Bran tried to let go of it, but it was stuck to his hand. He couldn't let go of it. It was a magic ball of yarn, and that queen of the Island of Women reeled him in, like she got a nice catch, reeled him in, reeled him in, reeled him in, brought him ashore and planted a kiss on his lips, and then all worry melted away. And the other sailors, like sleepwalkers, followed Bran up into the castle of women on the Island of Women, and they were all led away to their separate houses they had that were ready waiting for them, and every single house was exactly as they could have dreamed their ideal house to be, and each one of those men had a female that came and selected them and led them away. Well, let me tell you, those sailors were ravenous after a long sea voyage of, just ship's biscuits and dried fish and whatever else ancient Irish sailors used to eat. So they really wanted to, feast, and they were not disappointed. They whatever food they wanted was laid before them. And the thing is, the banqueting tables laid before them, no matter how much they ate, it was always refilled. You know this motif. And they slept beautifully, full of beautiful dreams, and the music in that place was like no music they'd ever heard. And if ever they wanted to hear a certain tune, it would play in their ears, and they had all the pleasures of the flesh laid out before them, if you know what I mean. And all through the day they would hunt, they would play games, they would eat, they would have sex, they would swim in the glorious seas. Everything was wonderful. It was perfect. Everything was perfect. And if ever they wanted for something, it was there, just provided to them. It was just a place of abundance, a place of bounty. And they were there for a long time. I can't tell you how long. Time operated in a different way on this island, but let's say it was about a year. It seemed like about a year, about that many days and nights. Well, what can I tell you? I guess paradise gets a bit dull after a while. And there was one among their number. His name was Lachlan. The seed of discontent began to grow in him. It was the seed of longing. Grass is always greener, isn't it? He began to long again for Ireland. The story doesn't really tell us why. Maybe he missed the songs, the poetry, the green hills. Maybe none of the women were for him. Who knows? Maybe there was a young man waiting for him back in Ireland that he missed. I don't know. But for a while, this seed of discontent grew and grew, and for a while the others hushed him up. Shh, no, this is great here. Why do we want to go back home? This is much better. But he would plead with them one in turn and say, Don't you remember the hunt home? Don't you remember? I want to be sad again. Because, let's be honest, you can't just have all the highs all the time. Without the lows, what is happiness? And after a while, discontent spread like rot through all the men of Éire. And Bran, being the good leader and king that he was, he had to listen to his men. So he went to his beloved in this island, the queen, the one from the dream, and said that, my men want to return home. And she said, if you return home, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And Bran said, I know that, but to be honest, I see what they're getting at. There's something about home, beautiful as this place is, and I appreciate your hospitality. There's something about home that is just, home. And with great sadness and great regret, that woman of the Sidhe, the fairy queen of the Otherworld, of the Island of Women, said, you've got to do what you've got to do. But promise me this. On your way home, first pick up your companion from the Isle of Joy. It's only fair to do that. But when you get home, please do not set foot on the soil of Ireland. Just just visit the place from the shore, from the boat, and then come back. And Bran said, I will. So, the men of Ireland set sail. They gathered together their possessions and they said farewell to the island of women. There was a certain sadness on all the women's faces. They knew they would never return. So they sailed, and before long they reached the island of Joy, and the men called out to their companion, and almost as if the dream had just fallen from him, he looked around at his laughing companions as if they were mad, and just ran out and climbed aboard the ship. And they asked him what was so bloody funny. He couldn't really tell them. Maybe all of this is a bit of a joke. So they sailed on for a little while, 3 more days over the storms, no sign of Manannan Mac Lir, and eventually they reached the beautiful green Isle of Éire, of Ireland, home. And they came along the shore, and there were a crowd of people watching this strange ancient ship roll in from across the Western Sea. And Bran and his companions looked at all these people that were there, and they were different. Their clothes were different. They looked grey, like just small, weaker versions of humans. And they called out, and there was just like a young, just a few scrawny people picking through the beach, and they said, "It is I, Bran, High King of Ireland. I have returned." And they said, "You what? King Bran? He's just a fairy tale. We haven't heard the name of King Bran for hundreds of years. Hundreds. You're pulling our leg, you strangely dressed sea people." Well, Lachlan, the one with homesickness that really wanted to return home, this was too much for him. Like, no. And those companions tried to grab him. They heard they'd been warned not to set foot on Ireland. He leapt off the sea, waded through the water, but as soon as his feet touched the sand, his skin, his flesh just withered off his bones, and he turned into a skeleton that just fell and then crumbled to dust before it even hit the floor, and was taken away by a shore wind. That was enough of a warning. None of the other men of Bran's expedition dared go ashore now, and by this time there was a great crowd on the beach. They were marvelling at these strange sea people, these strange ancient kings of Ireland that had come straight out of the world of fairy tale to their shore. Well, there was nothing else to do. Bran and his men inscribed details of their journey that they had undertaken in sticks, in ogham staves, and tossed them onto the waves, so they washed up ashore. That's how we have the story of the Voyage of Bran. Well, their story passed on to the people of Éire. They had nothing else to do but to turn that ship around and sail off into the sea. Maybe they went back to the Isle of Women. Maybe not. Maybe they were blown across the seas, and maybe they are still sailing to this day. And that, my friends, is the story of the Voyage of Bran. It's a funny sort of story, that one, because there's lots of strange motifs. I mean, obviously, we've got echoes of the Odyssey here. Something to be said about this story as well. It was written down, I'm not quite sure when, probably after Ireland has been Christianized. So this was written down by Christians, and there's quite a lot in this story where Manannan, the sea god, talks about the coming of Christ and the second coming, and how he, like the angels, is not fallen like they are, and one day they will be redeemed as well. So a lot of very Christian metaphysics in this story that I didn't include in this telling, but it is there. But also these very, very pagan pre-Christian elements seeping in as well as very interestingly, this idea of time. time being both linear clock time that we experience in this world, like on Ireland, and eternal sort of cosmic time that Manannan Mac Lir experiences, or the women on the island of women experience. I've talked about this on this channel before on another video, dreaming of the future. These two elements of time. One is the time that we experience, and one, you might even call it mythic time, because it's happening right now. It's ever present. And another very interesting idea in this story of just different perceptions of the world, like this world may be an illusion, and though we perceive it in one way, actually it might be a very, very different thing indeed. And that's very, very interesting, because you get this in Buddhism, you even get this in contemporary physics, but here it is baked into a Celtic conception of the universe, preserved in this folkloric tale. Thanks for listening. See you again soon.